Greetings everyone. Today I'm going to teach you how to draw a face. Now the first thing we want to do when we draw a face is to get the head outline. So let's try to practice with a couple of shapes to see what kind of head we can get going today. Alright, now I'm drawing in the GIMP. GIMP is a free drawing program you can download at thegimp.org, and I'm just going to start playing around with little shapes here. We got a basic roundish shape here. We could get a triangle head going here. Square jaw type head. And we'll go for a pear-shaped head too. Now these are all pretty much exaggerated shapes right now, but you'll find that if you can get the proportions right, if you can get the other details in place looking realistic, you can make real looking people out of pretty crazy shapes. So let's get started with our head here. I'm just going to use a ellipse kind of shape, nice rounded jaw and a rounded top of the head too. Now, a good way to test if your drawing is looking good is you can flip your image. Now, there's no shortcut that I know of on GIMP, so I built one in here that allows me to flip it back and forth. If you're drawing on a piece of paper, you can use a mirror and place it next to your drawing and look at your drawing in the mirror. You'll often notice oddities that you wouldn't notice in the first place, just because your eyes are used to seeing things more on one side than another. See, now I notice that this side is a lot more straight and this side is just a lot more curvy. So I can add more curvature to this side here and maybe play on this side to give it a straighter edge. Here we go. And I'm just going to draw a guideline here down the face, split it in half, and I'm going to split it in half vertically too. Now this is important for the eyes because when we first learn to draw, people have a tendency to draw the eyes up here. That's basically just, you know, an importance bias in the sense that we notice the eyes. People's eyes are expressive. When I'm talking to you right now, my eyes are just widening up and there's life in them. And we don't have a tendency to notice the forehead up here. So what we do is we throw the eyes up here and the hair up here, and then there's no forehead. So that's why it's very useful to draw these guidelines in the first place. Now, when you get good, you don't necessarily need to draw the guidelines all the time, but you want to keep in mind that they're there, you know. So we can put the eyes on the guideline here. Now, a good measure to know how wide the eyes should be, I'm just going to erase a little bit of extra lines here before I start drawing the eyes. Make my eraser bigger and give it a full opacity here. There we go. Now, to know how wide the eyes are going to be, we're going to do a split for the width of 5 eyes. So usually a person will be able to fit the width of 5 eyes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this should be approximately this shape. So you'd have the width of one eye here where the nose is going to be, and your eyes fall on either side of that width here. So I can erase my guide here. And now we have a sketch for about how big the eyes should really be. Now the nose is pretty much the same thing here. You can, well, that's actually it's a lot simpler, because if you cut the other line in half here, you'll get where the bottom of the nose ends up. Now the bottom of the nose isn't necessarily the tip. You'll see. We can build the nostril up in here, and the outside of the nostril will go here. But how wide do we make the nose? How wide do we make the mouth? What we use to measure that with is a triangle that starts with one point in the center of the head, and with the guidelines going down on either side like this. Now, they'll join up with the outside of the nostrils here, and they'll give you the width of your mouth right here. Now this is just an approximation. You can tweak and play around, but when you're learning and you don't know how big things should be, this is a pretty good guideline to get you going on drawing a realistic looking person. Now I'm putting the cheeks in here, just basically giving you that round shape here, and then digging in with a straight line going down the side of the jaw. This is actually a muscle that'll pull up and close the jaw when our character is eating or talking or what have you. Alright. So now once we have the eyes, we can place the eyebrows above there. Just give it enough room to lay there. We can even raise one a little bit higher, give him some personality. Put the eyes in the center, trying to get him looking at us here. And as far as the neck goes, the neck's always going to be a little shorter, even if it's a huge bulging athletic neck like here. It's always going to be just tucked in behind the ears here. But our character today isn't going to be too athletic. Alright. Speaking of the ears, you'll find that the ears align with the nose pretty much. So if I draw a line out from the nose out here, and you'll notice I'm not using the center of the head, but I'm using where the nose would start off at the forehead level, right here. And this will give us the guidelines for the lower and for just the height of the ears, basically. Now, to draw the ears, you basically want to have an oval shape, but that curves in towards the head. Our ears are maybe a little big on this one. We can shorten it, use our eraser to make them smaller a little bit. Here we go. And to draw the inside of the ears, basically we can use one line to show the curvature, and then there's the little, whatchamacallit, forget the name of this little piece of the ear here. And you have the earlobe over here. Now inside the ear you have a shape that goes out of its way, out of the basic shape of the ear, and comes back in and joins in with the lobe like here. Now my brush is getting a little bit thick, so we're going to go in and move in for the details. But first we're going to flip it and see if there's any obvious mistakes. I can see that the jaw isn't as low here as it is here, and the head isn't as curved here. And we can square it off here. I'm basically adjusting both sides to each other so there's a little bit more symmetry. Doesn't have to be perfect, but this will give you a tool to make it easier to find that symmetry. Because if you want to create beautiful people, you'll find that we're, as humans, very biased to symmetry. We just respond to it really well as a sign of beauty and perfection, which isn't always the case, but we are lazy beasts and we love to get those fast cues in there. Alright, so that's how you draw a head. Now we'll just clean it up and finish it off. Alright, let's do that. We'll draw a little bit of lines to hint at where the little bump of the eyebrow ridge finishes off. And you can add a few more lines that'll be just the wrinkles on the forehead. Because since his eyebrows are lifting up ever so slightly, you'll just show a little bit of wrinkle here. And we can draw the hairline. Start around this area here in the forehead and give it that curved back edge at first, and then it curves back in until it rests on the side of the ear, where if it's a man you could start his beard, and if it's a woman you can just draw long hair coming down here or short hair that ends in this area here. Now let's give him a little bit of crazy hair to make him interesting here. Maybe have his hair not be all perfect. I'll just make him seem a little bit more human, a little bit more real. Here we go. Now the Adam's apple is going to be somewhere around here. And we're just going to have the arteries come down under the neck here. Won't focus too much on the neck since we want to take a look at the head mostly. So I'm just going to get a little bit more detailed here. Increase the opacity, make a little bit darker line here. Let's get a darker color. Here we go. And a little bit of skin resting on top of the eyelids here. We can draw the side of the bump of the nose if your character has a bumpy nose like I do. And just highlight the lines that are important and ignore the ones that are just basic guidelines. Get the lips up in here. Now each part of his face, there's little tips and tricks for each one of these, which I can't go all in depth into this short little video, but I just want to show you going through the steps just one first time before we dive into the details of each, probably in future videos. There we go. A little bit of shadow here. The top part of the ear blocking the light, causing a little bit of shadow on the lower parts here. And this gives us more depth, more volume to the ear, because the ear is a pretty complex thing. It's almost like drapery, the way the shapes move in and out of each other like this. It's just a lot of flat curves moving in and out. Here we go. Drawing a little bit of the hair strands over the big bulky shapes that I drew initially. Drawing lines on the interior of the face, sometimes just short little hints of a line make the character a lot more interesting than drawing out the whole guideline like we do in the initial phase. You know, you just want to leave subtle hints maybe. And now we're going to erase. Just increase the side of our eraser here, and maybe just lower the opacity so it doesn't erase everything, but just fades it out a little bit, like so. Sometimes it's interesting to keep the lines we put in place, but just get them just a bit lighter than they really are. Same thing with the forehead. You don't want them to look too old, so if you just go over once with the eraser, it'll just make it a lot more paler, so it's not as noticeable. Makes him look a little bit younger. Lines will inevitably add a lot of age to the appearance of our character here. And once we remove most of the initial guidelines, we can add a little bit of the shadows. Alright, now we'll use the airbrush here, lower the opacity, widen the brush a little bit. Okay, this brush size here. Oh. Okay. A lot smaller than this. Still. Okay. This should do the trick. Zoom in a little bit and start putting shadows. See, if we put our light source, let's say over here, everything that is blocked by the light, that's the ridge of the eyebrows, the side of the nose here, the underneath of the nose, everything that is away from the light is going to cast a shadow. Like so. Even on the side of the head, we're going to have a big, even in the hair, on the other, underneath of the hair, and the side away from the shadow. Even the hair is going to cast a bit of the shadow on top of the head, underneath the cheeks. The jaw obviously is going to cast the deepest shadow on the head here. Come back and give it a second, third go. Under the lips, I already drew in the upper lip darker because I knew instinctively that The upper lip most of the time is always going to cast that shadow and be darker than the other side of the lip, which tends to reflect a bit of light. So a little bit of shadow on this cheek, but not as much as this one. And the ear will be a lot darker on this side, even though this one has a bit of shadow too. So that is how you draw a head. I hope you learned something today. Try it out. Show me what you've done, and if you have any other questions, or if you'd like to see another video on how to draw any other aspect of drawing, really, just ask away. Hit the subscribe button, subscribe to the video, and keep drawing.